Hey, good morning. I'm Gabriel Spitzer. It's Monday, and this is Seattle Now. If you've been thinking about moving to Canada, you might want to check if you've got any forgotten Canadian ancestors. That's because back in December, it became much easier to inherit Canadian citizenship. We'll talk about what's changed and why with immigration consultant Cassandra Fultz in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Washington is now the 7th most expensive state for older adults. That's according to a University of Massachusetts study that tracked essential costs for seniors like food, healthcare, and rental housing. Just a decade ago, Washington ranked 14th. For seniors living in the Seattle area, the cost of living is 28% higher than the national average, according to the Seattle Times. Researchers say housing is the main driver for the higher costs of living. Tech companies have inquired about building 5 big data centers in Seattle that could potentially strain the city's power supply. Combined, their electricity would add up to about a third of Seattle's daily power usage. The Seattle Times reports City Light is rewriting contracts for large power users that would require them to acquire their own energy supply and foot the bill for infrastructure upgrades. According to the paper, Seattle City Light is already facing challenges just keeping up with population growth. The utility says it will need to double its electricity generation by 2033. And calling all small businesses, the city of Seattle is offering grants for space upgrades. The deadline to apply is tonight at 5. The city's offering grants of up to $15,000 to install new signage and up to $50,000 to upgrade equipment. The grants are open to any independently owned small business in Seattle that's been operating for at least 2 years. We'll be back with more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. For some people, it is now much easier to get citizenship in Canada. Before, Canada had a first-generation limit in place. That meant only the children of Canadians could inherit citizenship. But recently, the Ontario Superior Court ruled that the first-generation limit is unconstitutional. And that has opened citizenship by inheritance up to more generations of Canadian descendants. Cassandra Fultz is a Canadian immigration consultant in Ontario. She's also a dual American-Canadian citizen, and she's here to talk about what's changed and what she's seeing from prospective applicants. Hey, thank you for taking the time, Cassandra.
Thank you so much for having me, Gabriel. It's really my pleasure.
So it used to be that if your parent was Canadian, then you could inherit their citizenship, but not if your grandparent or your great-grandparent or something like that was. Now, is it like, how far back can you go? Like if I had a Canadian in my lineage from the 1800s or something, would that do the trick?
You can go as far back as you might imagine, as long as you can prove it. That's the key. You have to be able to prove it. You can't just say it's the case. So you can use a grandparent, a great-grandparent, a great-great-grandparent. Truly, the sky is the limit as long as you have documentation.
So American citizens who aren't Canadian citizens can still relocate to Canada, right? Can still legally enter the country, can live there and work if they go through all the proper channels. What difference does it make to actually have that Canadian passport?
That's a good question. So yes, you can absolutely still do that. Even if you have no ties to Canada, there's a whole system of immigration that you can utilize to work in Canada, to go to school, to eventually get permanent residence and then citizenship. You can naturalize on your own. There's a whole pathway that you can follow, and millions of people have done and continue to do this. So yeah, even if you don't have a Canadian grandfather, you can totally still come to Canada as long as you follow that pathway. If you do happen to have that Canadian ancestry, then you can kind of skip to the end. That's really it.
And do you have, rights and privileges in Canada holding that passport that I wouldn't have if I were just an American living there?
Yeah, definitely. So if you are a Canadian citizen, you hold full rights and privileges. So you can vote and you can even run for office yourself. And another consideration, which is huge that a lot of people are considering, is that you can participate as a Canadian citizen in the International Mobility Program. And what that does is it allows you to apply for an open work permit for more than 40 different countries. Okay, so if you are under the required age, it varies by country, but up to age 35, generally between ages 18 to 35, you can apply and get an open work permit, usually up to 2 years long, and you can go to that country and live and work and enjoy. The most popular program in the international mobility it's called the Working Holiday Program, okay? Loads of people do this, and it's a reciprocal program. So we have lots of people in Canada who have done this. And so we're full of Brits, Aussies, Irish, Japanese, Icelandic people who are participating in the program. They come to work in Canada, and we can do the same. Because, like I said, it's a reciprocal program. So their citizens can come here, and our citizens can go there.
What are you hearing particularly from Americans who are interested in Canadian citizenship, about why they're exploring it?
Everyone has their own reasons for pursuing this. You see that genealogy is a huge interest for people in 2026. It's really common that people are interested in finding their roots. Another reason is that people want a place that they feel safe. They want to have a place that wants them. And not everybody feels wanted today in the US, and there may be a place that they do feel wanted. And for some people, that's Canada. And sometimes the reasons are, sort of more mundane, professional reasons. They want to accept a job. They want to go to this university. We worked with a film director who wanted to claim Canadian citizenship to get funding for a project, for example, and it was Government of Canada funding. You had to be Canadian. So there are all types of reasons that people do it.
And just to sort of address the elephant in the room, I mean, it seems that in the last 10 years since President Trump took office, there has been a lot of at least chatter, culturally about Americans wanting to move to Canada. How often does that come up in the folks you work with?
Here's what I can tell you. The thought of moving to Canada when you're unhappy with the election results, this is very common, okay? Every 4 years, somebody's not happy. And that's always been the case. So what we always see is immediately after the election results start to come in, traffic spikes, the website spikes, phone is ringing off the hook. Even a couple of election cycles ago, Americans crashed the Canadian immigration government website. That's how big the traffic was. Usually, people become resigned to the outcome, and they're just like, oh yeah, well, it's only 4 years, no big deal. We'll revisit it in the future and, sort of live to fight another day. It's unique this time because I would say that curiosity about moving to Canada, that interest in maybe a change of scenery, has not dissipated since November of 2024 like it normally does. Usually, you get that spike right after the election. It's a little quiet through Christmas time, and then right around, Inauguration Day, it spikes again, and then that's kind of it. It all goes downhill. But this time, it's, we're coming up on the midterms, and people are still very interested.
So can you walk me through some of the logistics of actually getting Canadian citizenship? What are the sort of hoops you have to jump through?
The most important thing is that you need to have your documentation ready to demonstrate that you are directly descended from a Canadian, because it's not enough to just have, Canadian ancestry in your DNA test, right? You can't just have, 2% Quebecois. That's not going to cut it. You have to be able to show with documentary evidence that it's your great grandmother or grandfather, whomever it is. So getting your documents together, this is the first step. And once you have what you can get, you can't get everything. It's really common that sometimes something that you are trying to get to substantiate your case, it's just not available, right? If you're trying to get that baptism certificate, but the church burnt down in 1897, it ain't coming. Like, there's nothing you can do about that. So you have to get everything that you can. And then once you have the documents that you can get, that's when the application to Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, so the Canadian government, that's when the application gets submitted. Because all those documents, copies of them, get included with the application. And that's what they use to make their decision. So what we do for our clients is we review all of their documents. We make recommendations on what else they might be able to use to prove their ancestry, right? To show that they do indeed meet that legal requirement and cross that threshold to be considered Canadian. And then the application gets submitted to the government, and then you wait. You do a good bit of waiting. And then once it's done, then you get that email that makes you so happy, and you're a Canadian, right? You will receive proof of Canadian citizenship in the form of a certificate, either electronic or paper. And then once you have that, you can apply for your Canadian passport. And then you can just show up if you want to.
I wonder, are there any challenges that people ought to consider, American citizens, say a Washington resident, ought to consider before they do this? Are there a lot of costs? Is it a big time commitment? I don't know. What should folks keep in mind if they're considering it?
From my standpoint, there is no downside. There's nothing that should stop you from doing this. The only sort of fringe, consideration that, and I say fringe, I don't mean that it's crazy. I just mean it just really doesn't apply to that many people. The only consideration would be if you have like a U.S. security clearance and you are not allowed to hold other citizenships, if there's any restriction on that, or if you are already a citizen of some other country who has a conflict with dual citizenship, as a concept. Even for those countries, most of the time, if you inherit the citizenship, it doesn't matter. It's not the same. The issue is if you naturalize, which is not what this is. There's no tax obligation. Okay, so for people going the other direction, if you claim U.S. citizenship through a parent and you eventually get it, well, guess what? You get the privilege of filing taxes with the IRS for the rest of your life. So enjoy that. There's no consideration like that in Canada. You only become a tax resident of Canada if you move to Canada, which you're welcome to do, but certainly it's not required. You don't have to change your life at all.
Do you feel comfortable sharing your own immigration story? Like what led you to become a dual citizen?
I was married to a Canadian guy. All right. So it's kind of the tale as old as time. I'm just like my clients. We're all the same. I met a guy and we got serious. This was down in the US. And the question was, do I sponsor him for a green card in the US? Or did he sponsor me for permanent residence in Canada? And we ultimately decided on Canada because this is a long time ago. Okay, it's 20 years ago this year, actually. I'm from South Carolina. And so at that time, the economy was not doing great in South Carolina. All the manufacturing had been offshored. The economy was gutted in the state. It would have been impossible for me to support the two of us while he could not work. Versus he was from the Toronto area. So we moved up to Toronto. He got a job immediately and it wasn't easy, but it was doable. Whereas to go the other direction was a lot more fraught. So I immigrated to Canada. I became a permanent resident. I was, sponsored. I went through the spousal sponsorship process. I didn't have any help, but we made it through. And that relationship did not survive like a lot of sponsorships, but I'm still here. This is my home now.
Well, Cassandra Fultz is the founding Canadian immigration consultant at Doherty Fultz Immigration, and she joined us from Toronto. Cassandra, thank you so much for giving us the time.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Appreciate you listening to Seattle Now, and thanks to our generous donors for your support. Our borders are always open to new listeners. Help us get them by rating and reviewing our show on your podcast app or sharing this with a friend. Today's episode was produced by Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Andy Hurst, Vaughn Jones, Paige Browning, and Patricia Murphy. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Gabriel Spitzer. We'll see you tonight for Evening Headlines.